Welcome to Beyond the Box. This is the podcast where we dive into supply chain and logistics, brought to you by Maersk. My name is Philip Lewin, and today we're going to look at the intersection of supply chain logistics, artificial intelligence, and decarbonization. And today we have some great experts on supply chains to bring in their perspective, how we manage to decarbonize while also dealing with all the pressures that supply chain and logistics managers are under these days. Christopher Tang is a distinguished research professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Dr. Nada Sanders is a distinguished professor of supply chain management at Northeastern University in Boston. So, welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, Phil. Delighted to be here.
So let's start by looking at decarbonization and supply chain strategies. Decarbonization efforts are important for the climate, but they also have to make the business case, which can be really challenging considering all the pressure companies are under today, all the supply chain shocks and disruptions. So, how do we create win win scenarios where companies can set and make emission reduction targets while also running effective supply chains? Chris, let's start with you, please. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that whenever there are changes, companies usually going through different stages. So many companies now they started from focusing on the cost reduction. They think about in terms of compliance because in EU you have the corporate sustainability due diligence directive, so they need to reduce the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. But then I think some of the companies they're more proactive. They try to incorporate that into part of the strategies to try to create value. So in that case, they may use new technology or new operations such that they can actually create a win-win situation.
And Nada, do you have some thoughts on this also?
I do. I think the resilient playbook, friendshoring, multi sourcing, looking at data driven scope 3 emissions together, I don't see these being in contrast or contradiction. I actually think they go hand in hand. We talk about building resilient supply chains, and that ties with decarbonization, ESG as a discipline. Has matured. I don't think it is foreign anymore to boards, to investors, to C suite leadership. And I think it is something that I think we acknowledge is with us and is absolutely critical and related to performance.
Yeah, and that's an important point. These days, companies are under so much competing priorities, geopolitical instability, higher prices, higher interest rates. How do we make sure that decarbonization stays in the boardroom?
Phil, that is a wonderful question because I think a lot of companies, they're under pressure to do good and do well at the same time. But the question is how? How do you get there? So I think that a lot of companies, they try to figure out where do I start? So I think that you look at the supply chains operations, many companies, they still lack the visibility of the supply chain structure. So without knowing the structure, how could they really reduce the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3? So therefore, there are different processes they need to go through. Then the question is how many companies are willing to make that big investment to go all the way to get to there? The companies still need to find ways to actually reduce the carbon emissions such that to create a win-win situation, as you said earlier. But now there's some companies are actually taking steps to do that.
Yeah, Nada, can you build on that a little? This perspective of the company's ownership of decarbonization.
Yes. So I think there are two aspects that I think are important. One is to continuously connect ESG to financial metrics, to market growth, to company performance. And number two, that I think is really important is continuous upskilling of board members and education to keep them up to date in terms of what the regulation is and then also what the capabilities are from a technology standpoint. Yes, we have these political headwinds that are going on, but administrations come and go. The reality of what ESG is and where things are and how they're evolving, this is not something that can be ignored.
Right. I would like to add to that. I think that that is very good in terms of ESG movements Companies are looking into that, especially in Europe. But there's still lack of case studies. Very few companies have been really trying to really show the returns on the investment is really as substantial. So I think we need some of the poster child to show to the world that if you do certain ways to integrate the carbon emissions reduction into part of your business model, in that case, you could generate a win-win situation. So for example, right now we have AI, we have blockchain, we have many smart sensors, can track many the carbon emissions, but then this costs money. And then how do you integrate that into part of your business model such that you can see that actually you can reduce emissions and reduce costs, and so that you can pass the cost savings to the consumers? That's how you get the win-win situation, right? So now I think they look at companies such as Walmart, such as Maersk. They are doing some of this, but I think that we need to have more case studies to convince more board members, more companies. You can do good and do well at the same time. So, for example, Amazon has a very smart logistics systems. So now they do a lot of pooling deliveries. So when you click something, you say, hey, would you like to receive maybe just one day later? We can consolidate some of the deliveries in your neighborhood. It will reduce the carbon emissions. So I think a lot of conscious consumers say, well, I can wait for one more day. Now, but doing that, Amazon can consolidate the deliveries. They become more smarter deliveries. Then reduce the carbon footprint and also reduce costs. So that is a good example.
There's so much data flowing through the world's supply chains anyways, in addition to sustainability metrics. And Nada, maybe you can talk a little about what can we do to leverage all this data and new tools like generative AI, like blockchain, like Chris mentioned, to improve our environmental performance.
The current global corporate investment in AI for 2025, I believe it's expected to be something in the order of 350, give or take, billion in 2025 compared to 2024, which was more like 250 billion. Now, here's the interesting part. Roughly about 80% of these endeavors don't meet their goals. When I'm talking about AI investments, technological investments driven by AI. So we need case studies that actually document and prove success. We have huge capability in from the standpoint to be able to have data visibility, tracking, to identify hotspots, which is absolutely huge when we look at ESG, predictive analytics, digital twins. I'm a huge fan of digital twins. They enable us to do scenario planning, to test, and to prepare, which is, huge opportunity. But again, this costs money. And I think it would be very important to have case studies that begin to target these capabilities and be able to home in terms of what a company needs and the kinds of gains that are achieved by lesser investments. I think it's very easy to look at big companies, whether it be the Amazons, the Walmarts, Unilever. I mentioned BMW. These are all huge success stories. But I think the majority of companies sit back and they go, well, what about us? What's our P&L? What's our financial portfolio look like? And what do we invest in? And I think this is where the case studies will come in, where yes, we can do all these things. Phil, we can really track data so well now, and we have the capabilities, whether it be blockchain platforms. Then it becomes an issue of how do we fine tune the data with our partners to where we share what's needed, but not overload. How do we make sure the data is accurate and clean? And then how do we make sure that we are investing in what we need, but not too much?
I want to dovetail what Nada said earlier. Right now, with AI, with data analytics, predictive, prescriptive analysis, we can do them all. But this is more like a big company's playbook. And IBM Watson supply chain can do many of those. But medium-sized company does not have the luxury. But there's hope. we can actually build up all these case studies or success stories. We can use AI to learn from all these case studies to distill the key essence. So you use large language model, machine learning to say, hey, out of all these case studies, how would this apply to a medium-sized company in a certain environment? Now, that's where AI can actually create more value without going through the actual practice, right? So I think I want to emphasize the the power of the AI. It is untapped.
I think it's also an important point because at the same time, all this is going on, cybersecurity risks are also increasing, and a lot of companies are really looking at the data that goes outside their firewalls. And maybe, Chris, can you share some insights a little on how companies can share, for example, to collaborate around emission reduction targets or other opportunities?
In terms of data security, it is a big issue because of cyber attack and whatnot. That's bring up the trust issues. So many companies try to do the blockchain because of the trust issues and also incentive issues for different partners. So it's not really even about cybersecurity issues. It's about trusting other companies in terms of data sharing. Then I think that different firms need to come to terms what kind of data can be shared, what kind of data should be built within the firewalls. So I think this type of protocol need to take place. You actually sign on to all these AI tools. So that's why we need to have the guardrails to protect companies and also protect the national security. But I think that we are aware of this potential risk and we try to develop protocols such to reduce, mitigate this risk.
I'm involved in one study right now. We've been actually tracking S&P 500 firms and their risks over the last 5 years and how they've changed. And cyber has emerged, obviously, as the number one risks. And this is based on their financial reporting that we've been able to pull out with natural language models. And it's really staggering as to how much AI and cyber is dominating now in terms of the risk. So, trust, as Chris mentioned, is absolutely critical. We need to share information, right? That is the essence if we think about scope three and we talk about, the supply chain. At the same time, we need to share just enough, and we have to be very careful in terms of what we share, when it is shared. We talk about real time, but we have to have guardrails. And then, of course, KPIs, keeping in mind that these are iterative processes. So continuous improvement is alive and well here, and it has to be built into this process in terms of growing together.
Very interesting. I'm glad you also mentioned small and medium enterprises like Chris, because it's not only for the S&P 500 size companies. And also to build on that, there's also a lot of increasing regulation in Europe. We have CBAM, new measures coming in Brazil and Indonesia. How do you think this is shaping companies' plans from both the compliance and our companies looking to go above and beyond to just ticking the boxes to do more?
I'm so glad that Europe is put the CBAM in place. This is a carbon border adjustment mechanisms. So in the case, depending on where you source the product from, and then if there's a differential in the carbon emissions, then you have to pay the tax. In California, we do have a law. There was a law signed in 2023. It's basically companies operate in doing business in California. They need to disclose the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 measures by 2027. So many companies, they're struggling how to comply with CBAM, with the CSDDD, with the EU, all these requirements, and also California, some other countries. So right now, there are different requirements. So I think that they need to have another kind of maybe a global compliance regulations to come up with a more standardized regulations so that more companies can comply more easily. I think that at the same time, they need also build strategy how to capture the value that they invest in. So that could be in terms of smart logistics, how to reduce scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. And also on top of that, you can also use to build a brand. So some companies, they're using this as a marketing campaign. Of course, the most famous one would be Patagonia. Don't buy this jacket. right? So I think that we just need companies to think outside the box. And now is the moment.
No, and you raise a very good point about the complexity, even different regulations between different states in the US where you two are based, and globally, I think makes it very complex and investment a little riskier for people. And Nada, can you please weigh on your thoughts on this?
So, one of the things that I've been hearing recently, and I mean like over the past few weeks, is on social media comments of, ESG is dead. And I want to be clear that it is not just not dead, but it is so now part of the fabric of what we know has to be done that it is no longer just platitudes. It is no longer, greenwashing, but it is embedded in so many companies. And CBAM is such an important regulation, and we are seeing so many regulations that are coming forward. This isn't something that, oh, we're going to put on the back burner. I think that companies are aware of that. Companies know that investing in these technologies and investing in being aware of the regulation that is increasingly becoming more and more stringent on a global scale, not just on a local scale. And then couple that with what is happening with AI technologies that are further and further enabling capabilities. I think not paying attention and not bringing this to their C suite, to their boardroom, to their shareholders. I think they're going to miss out and they're going to find themselves very much behind in the next few years.
I would like it as to supplement what Mad was saying. I fully agree with her. ESG is not disappearing, but it is evolving.
Yes.
Reason is that this ESG first came out, it was evolved from the carbon emissions and then expanded from the E to the S and the G. Now, but then there were problems. The problems was that there are many different inconsistent measures. And also companies, they're subject to different ratings. Companies are overwhelmed with different measures, they cannot cope with that. So right now, the ESG community is trying to consolidate, come up with different measures, maybe industry-specific measures, such that they can operate more efficiently in certain way. But many companies, they're on the fence. They want to do good. So therefore, I think that's why the case studies, some of the poster child examples could make it go a long way. How can we actually help the companies to invest more wisely, such that they get the results that is the more easy to sell, and also helping the environment, helping the consumers as well. So I think that everyone has good intentions, but the question how to get there.
I think that's a really good kind of ending thought, Chris, that ESG isn't going away, it's evolving. Nada, what are your thoughts on this too? What would be your elevator speech for our audience?
Yes, thank you. My elevator speech is that ESG is now a very mature discipline. It has evolved. It is no longer seen as a moral choice, but a strategic imperative. And I think that ESG initiatives go hand in hand with supply chain resilience and supply chain agility.
Great, thank you. To Nada and Chris, thank you both for sharing some wonderful examples and all your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And just a reminder for our listeners that you can find Beyond the Box wherever you listen to podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So be sure to subscribe. Thank you for joining us.